This is me, and I will start with my introduction. And my name is Chris, as Adam said, and I use the pronouns he and him. I'm currently located in Kitchener, Ontario, and as Adam mentioned, I'm Director of Engineering at Wealthsimple. I currently lead a few teams, mainly around the areas of developer tools and edge reliability. And these teams are focused on serving the needs of other development teams here at Wealthsimple. We have teams both on front end and back end, as well as all of our kind of reliability engineering that happens within my area. I've actually been with Wealthsimple for about 10 months. And prior to Wealthsimple, I was at Shopify for 5 years. While I was at Shopify, I had the opportunity to work with many teams, actually, but I started with internal tooling, moved through a few product teams, and finally kind of like reliability and platform conditioning at Shopify. One thing that I will say up front as I kind of like talk through this, I will be, over the course of this talk, touching on some of my own personal experiences. And I think I can't assume that everybody listening, everybody out in the industry has had access to perhaps the same privileges that I've had as a white male in the industry. As I was creating this presentation and reflecting on my past and the opportunities that I've had, I started to think about how did I come by these, and certainly not the same for everyone. So why am I mentioning this? I think that hopefully other leaders that are listening to this talk, or potential future leaders that are out there listening, can follow suit and make some changes and think about things differently. We've made progress in the industry, and I still think we have a lot of ways to go. So with that being said up front, let's kind of get into it. Okay, so not too long ago, I was interviewing somebody for a developer position at Wealthsimple, and my own interview style, I like to be conversational with candidates. I like to kind of like get people comfortable talking. I find it helps reduce stress of the interview process. And I also encourage candidates to ask great questions and say that I'm an open book as much as I can be, and I like to be as transparent as possible. So I was talking to this candidate, and they were really curious about my experience going from a developer to a manager and what that was like. And after I had described my own career, spending time as a developer, moving in through management, the candidate asked me this question. And here's the question: would you do it all over again? And honestly, this was not a question that anyone had ever asked me before in an interview setting. I'm usually I get questions like, what's the team culture like? How much vacation time is there? Very kind of like standard interview questions. But this one stood out to me. And honestly, it took me a minute to answer properly in a way that I felt was satisfying to the candidate. But even now, I still think about this question, obviously, because I'm presenting about it here. It's stuck with me. It wasn't an easy yes or no, and I thought that was the most interesting. Yes, I would do it. Yes, I think I have enjoyed my career so far, but like maybe I would do it in some way differently. And I also tried to unpack what this candidate was getting at. I think that they were trying to identify if my path was a path that they wanted to follow through their own career, and if I would do it again, maybe they would. But ultimately, I wasn't sure. So this question, would you do it all over again? It kind of took me on this journey, and probably more than the candidate will ever realize. And I started my own exploration and reflecting on my journey. So pause for a second as I'm talking through the next little while. Reflect on your own experiences that you've had so far, maybe where you are in your current career, maybe you're a technical lead, maybe you're a people lead, maybe you're an aspiring leader, someone who's just beginning their career. It doesn't matter. Think about where you are and reflect on kind of like your experiences and ask yourself this question, because it's kind of cool. This is where I kind of started asking myself where actually am I today? What's my role and what's expected of me in this role? Is it where I thought I would be? What steps did I take to get here? And were they accidental? What parts were in my control or not? Ultimately, where am I heading? I think that's what we all want to know. Is the future is uncertain, but where am I heading? So I will talk about my journey and my observations along the way, and I've tried to just kind of bucket them into 3 points, and I'll get into these 3 points now. Step 1, or experience 1, many hats. My first job out of school was a front-end development job, and I mean, by and large, it was great. I was starting a new job at a brand new company. I was employee number 2, and we didn't really have titles. Where what we were working on, it didn't really matter. You just got into this you got into this role of wearing many hats. And so, for example, in addition to being a front-end developer, many of the back-end services that I was required to connect to weren't implemented. So I kind of put on the back-end developer hat and implement some of those endpoints just to set the stage. And I know I'm dating myself, but I was working with ActionScript with a PHP backend and communicating using SOAP for anybody who knows what these things are out there. But I will say that if I never have to see another WSDL in my life, it'll be too soon. Anyway, I also, in addition to kind of like coding work, I did some graphic design work. I did some product management. Didn't know it was product management at the time, but I sure was doing that. I even did a couple of years of sound design. You can see some instruments behind me. This is something that I was passionate about. But this is the norm. It was startup life. We did what was necessary. We were a small team, and you did what was necessary. Really, generalist growth was the name of the game. It was. I was there all for it. I was a generalist and able to kind of contribute where I could. I was able to use my existing skills and then fuel my own growth through a variety of areas that were really fulfilling to me. And I will say that startup life was all about learning. And so that's like my first key takeaway, learning. I had a hunger for learning, a hunger for new experiences. I said yes to just about everything that crossed my plate, or as often as I could. I would kind of like say yes and then try to like convince myself out of it afterward. I don't know if that was a good thing or not, but it helped me learn new technologies. It helped me build relationships with people. We also had like a lot of shared experiences. Startup life, for those of you who have experienced startup life, has a lot of ups and downs. It comes, big customers come up, they show up and they disappear. And sometimes you work on features and they never see the light of day. We had failures and we also had successes. But ultimately, everything, when I look back on that, was all about learning. So that was kind of like my first experience. This is my second one. It's management. What? Okay, so honestly, my first managerial experiences, I didn't realize that they were managerial experiences at the time until probably a few years later, looking back and thinking, okay, yeah, that probably was more of a manager position. I took on a role after my own manager left the company, and it turned out that I was the most suitable replacement. We had interviewed several candidates and tried to match up, thinking like skills have to match with context, have to match with experience, and it was very difficult to fill, especially being a startup. So I was, I guess, the next best thing. And so without much explanation or training into the role, I found the experience confusing and uncertain. I would spend most of my days helping other developers, sometimes talking to customers on the phone or even going to conferences. I had to do things like performance reviews for the first time ever. But I still measured my own worth as a developer. That's what I identified with early on in life. That's what I went to school for. It was like how I started my career. And so I felt like I still had to contribute as a developer. And many of you on this listening in right now probably realize what a trap this is. But I would spend many of my evenings trying to catch up on the coding that I felt like I had to do to recognize my own worth. And it took me definitely several months, maybe even years, before I realized that my impact as a manager was completely different than what it was as a developer. And it was more related to the team and the business and our customers than my own kind of like technical contributions at the time. It was broader, it was greater. So so as a second takeaway, I actually had more learning. This is my second takeaway from my second point. This came with skills that I had to develop in time management, prioritization, career development, other people's career development, not just my own. I had to learn a lot about the business side of things, what happened kind of like that I was unaware of. And a lot of it was like relationships with people internally, teammates that I worked with, and other relationships with customers and clients externally to the company. It was challenging, like I mentioned. It was challenging at first, but over time, I found it rewarding. It was all new to me, and I think I started to realize, hey, I'm actually learning, and I'm growing even more than I was before. And I was finding things out the hard way a lot of the time, but ultimately, those still resulted in learnings. So then, my third point here: varied leadership. I moved from a small company to a larger company, and when I started at Shopify, so this was 2016, we didn't have managers in engineering. We didn't call them managers. In fact, I think most people were allergic to that term, manager, and we were just called engineering leads. The funny thing is, we also had technical leaders at Shopify, but they were also just called engineering leads. And it was, I would describe it to people as like a spectrum of leadership. You have kind of like very highly skilled technical people who can solve really complex, deep problems, don't need or want direct reports, all the way through to like really great people leaders who can rally a team, have tons of followers, who can pull together an entire organization, and everywhere in between. There were these leaders. It was okay because it allowed a little bit of freedom in how you moved as a lead, but ultimately it was confusing for people, especially more junior people who were trying to figure out where they head on their career and where they're going. So I think around 2017, don't quote me on this, but I think around that time we moved actually to formally recognizing managers and tech leads, staff engineers, principal engineers, all the way up. So it was that kind of experience there that also opened my eyes to the fact that leadership or management, the way that I had kind of learned it through my own experiences, was so much broader than just my experience. It was you could really find your own skills and where they fit, and then expand from there. And it was okay to have a different skill set or a different leadership style and bring it and find a spot to apply it. And so that's kind of like my third learning, or my third point here, key point. Keep learning. Even when I started to like understand this all, my mind was opened. There were so many more nuances to pull out of just engineering leadership, let alone leadership in general. It was there. I've met great technical leaders who have great people skills. I've also met great people leaders who have really highly technical people. And my own journey, I went from leading one team to several teams, and now even today I'm leading 5 teams at Wealthsimple, and I use that still to learn from everyone around me. One of my Slack channels that I participate in, we have a daily reminder to post our TIL, our Today I Learned. And this is something that my team came up with, and we use it to share what we have learned and embrace that learning. So looking back, I have a ton of experiences that have shaped my specific career thus far. There's certainly been highs and there's been lows, just as you would expect of anyone. Many of the most impactful elements of my career so far have had this single thread that's been woven through them, that's followed me the entire time, and that is really to learn and then learn and then learn more. Simply put, just don't ever stop learning. Which brings me back to the question. This, by the way, it's not the candidate. If you didn't put that together, this is a dog. But the question is, would you do it all over again? And my answer is no. And the reason for that is, if I had the choice to do it again, I would take all of the experiences that I already have, and I'd keep them with me. Would I choose technology? Probably. Would I choose management? Maybe. Would I do it again? Yeah, but I wouldn't do it in exactly the same way. I'd find a new path. I'd force myself to continue learning, and I'd never stop learning. I'd craft new experiences, new challenges, new relationships, new journeys. Maybe take the technical path through leadership or not. Maybe work for more startups or not, or big companies. So, to the candidate that asked me this question, or to anybody who's listening into this talk, I have some advice. Don't follow somebody else's path exactly. Form your own path, full of challenges and full of learning. Don't even follow the path that you've started to create if there's nothing new to learn there. There's no predefined journey that you have to follow. Use the best of all of your abilities and stretch those to find new abilities that you didn't know you had. Learn, and then learn, and then learn some more, and don't ever stop learning. Thank you. This is me. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and some other places. Thanks to the organizers. And if you have questions, I would love to answer them.
Nice one, Chris. Thanks so much for that, mate. Let's see some hand clap emojis or face with love heart eyes, whatever you like. Just a little appreciation to show for Chris there and his kind of time. Yeah, so lots to unpack there. I think, yeah, definitely learning, succeeding and failing. You know, we learn a lot from the moment of success and the moment of failure, sometimes more from a failure, but nobody really talks about those sexy failures. So we'll certainly open it up to questions. One question I'll kind of throw in a bit of a weird one there, Chris. If you could go back and give yourself any kind of advice, you kind of that young front end developer just starting out in the startup world, what piece of advice do you think you'd give yourself about your career personally? I mean, I know you said kind of learning super important. Anything else you can kind of think of that might have steered you in a different direction, perhaps, or that maybe something now that current Chris thinks maybe younger Chris might heed some good knowledge from?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One, and I don't think I did this, but I've certainly encountered, like through conversations I've had with people who are looking for work, and they're really looking for a specific language or a specific technology. I would say don't limit yourself to that. Be open to even languages that you've maybe just used for a random side project, and jump in, because there's so much more after you've learned these technologies, especially if you have learned a variety of them. You can start to make yourself even more useful. You pick up things faster the more varied you are. So that would be one tip. For my own self, if I was to look back, I'd say to listen more, and listen to other people's opinions. Try to understand where other people are coming from and why they have those opinions, instead of trying to always drive mine. I can think of a few heated debates early on in my career where could have probably just taken a step back and listened.
I think that's great life advice in general. I guess it's that old sales saying, and is it two ears, one mouth? Use them in that order. So I think, yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
people sometimes often just are waiting for you to finish talk so they can kind of talk, but actively listening and engaging is a super important skill. And tell
100%.
us, Chris, tell us Wealthsimple are hiring. Tell us about all those juicy roles you got open in your team.
Oh yeah, definitely have lots of roles we're hiring. For those of you who aren't using Wealthsimple, you should download some of the products. We are a financial company, and we are really aiming to um, empower everybody to achieve financial freedom, no matter who they are, who or how much they have. So we have roles across the board for front end developers, back end developers, reliability engineers, UX, PM, you name it. There's tons of roles out there. So, yeah, if you are interested, can connect with me, and I'd be happy to chat.
Nice one. I just put a couple of links there in the chat section
There
there.
you
So
go.
if
Thank
anybody
you.
does want
Yeah,
to
you're
check
fast.
out the website and the career page there, certainly can do so there. And as somebody who's signed up to Wealthsimple myself in the last couple of months, that UX was super smooth, beautiful
Yeah,
experience. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Chris, mate, thanks again so much for tuning in tonight. Really grateful for your time and sharing your thoughts with us.
No problem at all. Thank you.